Did you know that you are able to change the look of your armor pieces in God of War Ragnarok? Yes, Transmog is actually in the game, although it's pretty well hidden. So we'll talk about that and a lot more features the game doesn't mention, like exploiting enemy weak points, how to best upgrade your gear, where to best spend your experience points, and way more. So let's go over that in this spoiler-free video so you can get the most out of your Ragnarok playthrough. A like would really help us out, subscribe for way more God of War Ragnarok tips videos like this one, and let's go. So new in Ragnarok is the ability to disable skills in your skill tree, which is pretty huge. To give you an example, I really like the heavy attack finisher you can unlock for the Leviathan axe, which you can trigger after 3 light attacks. But the light sprint attack for this weapon kind of gets in the way of that because it doesn't count as part of the combo, so now you need 4 hits instead of 3 to get the finisher. So to make sure I don't accidentally make my combo longer, I can just disable the sprint attack and always get my finisher on the 4th hit. By the way, if you like this playstyle, there's an armor you can buy when you reach Svartalfheim called Vidar's Armor of Might, which after a few upgrades will boost the damage of your combo finishers and gives you a chance to gain a damage boost after performing one as well. And in general, I think it's smart to unlock skills first, as most of them are pretty cheap, but you can also spend your XP on upgrades for your runic attacks, rages, and relics. And those latter two are actually new for Ragnarok, with rage previously having its own skill tree, but now there are different variants that have 3 upgrade levels that are unlocked with experience. In a similar fashion, relics have the same function as your talisman in the previous game. But unlike those, these new items are also upgraded with experience. There's actually a lot of relics you can craft at a blacksmith, so always check the special items tab to see if you found a new recipe and if you have the required resources to craft it, which are usually found during the optional quests and activities you find in the realms. And when comparing these, relics are actually the cheapest ones to upgrade here, with light runic attacks costing a bit more and then the heavy runic attacks and rages costing you the most XP. Which is actually fine if you consider that you only start discovering heavy runic attacks and new options for your rage when you're pretty far into the game. So by then, you'll have all the XP you need as well. And by the way, don't skip out on some of the runic attacks that were already present in God of War 2018, even if you didn't necessarily like them before. You can check the upgrade levels on a runic attack in your menu so you can see if something's changed, which isn't the case for every runic attack. Like the heavy runic Ivaldi's Anvil is still pretty much the same as it was in the previous game. But other returning moves have actually changed, like Hell's Touch that now has a follow-up attack on upgrade level 3 that it didn't have before. And although the stun damage on the second hit seems a bit reduced, you still build up a lot of it by tapping R1 twice, allowing you to quickly follow up with some barehanded hits and activate a stun finisher. And on a similar note for the blades, you will find that the Nemean Crush has been upgraded from a light runic attack to a heavy one. And after upgrading it to level 2, it will also trigger a volley of fiery mortar blasts.
Okay, looks pretty cool, that is. And speaking of looking cool, okay, bad segue. Sorry, I wanted to chime in here because, of course, a lot of people were curious about Transmog, because the developer said that it would be in Ragnarok at launch, but the game itself doesn't tell you about this at all.
Yeah, I've been looking pretty much everywhere in the menus, but I still couldn't find it.
Well, same here, but turns out that you only unlock it late into the game. No story spoilers, of course, whatsoever, but you need to upgrade a gear piece to level 9, after which you will see the Edit Appearance feature, and they can choose from all chest pieces in this case that you have crafted. And also cool is that you can switch between the different colors if you have the upgrades unlocked. Like, there are quite some armor sets that look pretty cool, but that you might not like the playstyle of. And it works the same for the gloves and the waist. But yeah, this does mean that you have to upgrade each individual gear piece to the max before you can change their look. And to get to level 9 requires you to play a ton of optional content, so it's really near the end of the game. So we will have a guide for this later on, but for now I wanted to let you know that yeah, it's already in the game, but very well hidden.
And that's not even the only feature the game doesn't tell you about, as I found a way to deal with specific enemies very quickly. Specifically, my journey through Alfheim became a lot easier after I realized that the Light Elves have a pretty glaring weakness that you can easily exploit by simply throwing your axe at their masks. This will knock it off, which immediately stuns the elf, so you can press R3 for massive damage on a stun finisher. There are actually more enemy types with weak points like the Stalker type enemies that you of course first encounter as a mini-boss in Midgard. They have a similar mechanic where if you can hit them on the head or the antlers, you stun them and deal some nice damage. And a lot of enemies are also vulnerable to an axe to the leg. You can often knock enemies prone by aiming an axe throw at their legs, and if you want to make sure they stay down, apply the new Sonic status effect to them as well. We actually discussed this new arrow type for Atreus and more in our pro tips for the early skills video, which I will link to at the end of this one. There are some weaknesses that are actually made clear by the game, like the Wisp's weakness, the runic arrows that you can also use to launch them into other enemies, which is actually very useful in some of the Muspelheim trials. But in general, the game is pretty secretive about them, so totally let us know if you found any other weak points in the comments below. Now, all of these combat upgrades and tips mean very little if you're not staying alive, and thankfully the Resurrection Stones from 2018 make their return here. Like in that game, there's 3 different types, and the first type unlocks very early into the game the first time you meet Sindri in Svartalfheim. Later on, you unlock better versions, like one that restores more of your health on revival, or the Berserker Stone that gives less health but a full rage bar on a revive. But the idea behind all of them is the same. For if you don't remember, you buy these items at a blacksmith and then you can choose to revive yourself after going down in combat, which will consume the stone. You can only carry one on you at a time, and you can always check if there's one active with this icon above your health bar. Needless to say, these can be a total lifesaver, especially during a tough boss fight, so totally make sure you've got one in your inventory at all times. And while they're not necessarily that expensive, if you're ever short on hack silver, remember that you can just sell the artifacts you find on your journey for some quick cash. Even if you sell them, they will still count towards the completion of their particular challenge, so no need to worry about that. And keeping an eye out and destroying all hanging buckets, pots, and other destructibles in an area will often reward you with some extra hack silver as well. And you can also break open crates and barrels when traveling by boat or by sled, which can contain hack silver, but also upgrade materials for your armor and gear. A bit less obvious than these breakable barrels are the plants in Vanaheim, but these two will give you a lot of useful upgrade materials. You will need runic arrows in order to open these bulbs, which once you've reached Vanaheim doesn't really take that long anymore. And then what you do is apply a runic sigil on the plant by aiming at it and commanding Atreus to fire with square, and then you trigger the sigil with your axe, which will freeze the bulb and then break it. You don't have to go looking for the loot, as it will always drop right at your feet, and like I said, these plants will often contain useful resources. So always scan your environment to see if you've missed any. And if you're really having trouble finding enough resources, there will be a point in the story where some of the early upgrade materials will become available for purchase at a blacksmith for pretty cheap too. And trust me, you will need quite a bit of resources to upgrade all of your armor sets. Both hack silver and specific upgrade materials that depend on the level of your gear are required to improve a piece of armor. And while it might be enticing to upgrade the chest piece first because it has the most stats on it, it's actually way smarter to do the opposite. You can upgrade both your wrist and waist armor for the same amount of materials and a bit more hack silver than it would cost you to upgrade a chest piece, but the overall stat increase as well as the increase in power level you get from upgrading 2 pieces is better than what you get for upgrading a single one. And sometimes you can even get an extra stat on a piece of gear, like the bracers for the Nidavellir set we mentioned in an earlier video, which makes it even better value for resources to upgrade those items. So if you're ever running low on resources, you now know which piece of armor to upgrade. And you can of course also upgrade Kratos himself by collecting the familiar Apples of Idun and the Horns of Bloodmeat from the Nornir puzzle chests. However, if you're having trouble with these puzzles, you can make things a bit easier on yourself by going into your settings menu. Under gameplay, you can find the puzzle timing option in the list of challenge level options. This allows you to extend the timing window on specific puzzles, which is of course great for some of the timed puzzles you find on these Nornir chests. They often leave you with a very small margin for error, so if you're getting frustrated after a couple of tries, you can just give yourself some more time. Regardless of your settings, some bells will ring out longer than others, so you'll also need to hit them in the correct order. If you're still having trouble after finding the correct sequence, then you can change the settings to give yourself more time. And right above puzzle timing in the settings, you can also find an option to turn on puzzle aim assist. This makes your cursor lock onto objects that are part of a puzzle, which makes it way easier to hit them in quick succession. Let us know if there are any tips we missed, as we will of course be making way more of these types of videos for God of War Ragnarok. So subscribe to miss nothing, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and if you want, you can watch our previous one on combat tips that you can already use at the start of the game. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.